family. What does it take to have conversations that create connections? What kind of connections do we want to make? Connections inside of conversations of complaint or of possibility. One of them builds community and the other destroys. Our mission in this space of creating community conversations for connections is about connecting our humanity and connecting it through building relationships. Relationships that inspire, engage, and cultivate our ability to imagine. Other volunteers, how many learned? Well, are you know God?
Relationships.
Well, actually, because we get, and so as a consequence, I've since been involved with Ghana quite a bit, and I met these young people in Ghana.
Some words of strength are encouragement. We're also working some quality control for us to make sure that everything is set up. And we also have bags that will come in, they're plastic, you know, the extra handbags. Like, they might walk out one of them because they was eyeing some of these handbags. Excuse me, Marquis, is that the bag? I just had to double check. I went up like, oh yeah, men wear these kinds sometimes. So I love so young people.
Yeah. So I can't wait to work. New ways of being with each other. New ways of honoring the gifts we all are endowed with. To generate new realities through the traumatic responses to oppressive conditions. Here, when we speak about conditions, we speak about conditions that go beyond our likes and dislikes, about ourselves, about others, and about the human condition. Here, we are creating connections of trust through building relationships that transform our social environment. So what is our social environment? Our social environment begins with our inner self. We have an inner social environment, and we have an environment of social relationships with our families, with our neighbors, with our neighborhood, with our communities, with our nation, with the world, and with the planet. My name is Dr. Fatima Hafiz, and welcome to 3C4C, Creating Community Conversations for Connections. Hey y'all, let's get started. Good morning, Anu.
Morning, Fatima.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. And it's it's a weekend, right? And your week has been done doing what you're doing with the people in your life. But before we get started, I'd like to just kind of this interview is about our connections, about human connections, and how we connect, and what does it take for us to connect, and what disconnects us. But before we get started, I'd like to just ask you, tell me your name, your full name.
My name is Anu Yahushua Abdul-Wahid.
How old are you?
I'm 32 years old and living.
Living. And do you have children?
I have one child.
Wow, it's a boy or girl. How old is she?
It's a girl. She's 8 years, about to be 9 years old this year.
Oh, man. Wow. Okay, so thank you for that. And what we're going to do is just begin with a question about our humanness. And I'm asking you, what do you think makes us human?
The drive for us to wanting to keep doing things that might not already have a finishing for us, but as long as there's a start for us, I believe we can finish.
So that start, what makes us human in terms of where does it start? You mentioned diligence, what does it take? But first, where does it start?
I guess it would start at making us human. For me, it would start at the everyday things like waking up, taking care of our hygiene, making sure we have something warm over our backs. That would be the start for me to being human.
And you mentioned diligence. What is the diligence that's necessary, or what is the drive that you talked about a little bit that keeps us moving, keeps us going as these beings?
Like I mentioned, like our hygiene, we want our hygiene to be correct. So when we go out and connect with other people or other human beings, we feel like we're clean. We feel like um, we feel human. We don't feel less than human.
Mm.
So we're striving as much as possible to feel more than human rather than less than human.
Wow. Talk a little bit more about more than human, right? You said you don't feel less than human, but what about the more than human? I hear that like we are striving always for more, but I want to hear from you when you say more. We don't feel like we're less than human. We want to always sometimes strive to be more than human. What does that mean?
For me, being more than human means um, standing our ground for our human connections, as in um, standing to let somebody know if their breath stinks, or standing to let somebody know if they have something on their face, or just the small um, things that we communicate to others that help sustain our own way of being, our own satisfaction of being human.
Mm. You just mentioned something. I want to kind of dig a little deeper around it when you said, because what I heard is that when you can be honest with someone about something, when you connect with them, because maybe you want them to be honest with you, because to feel fully human or to feel human, you don't want to feel like, something's there and people, are seeing it and you connected to me, we're connected as human beings. And I don't want to be walking around with, like my breath is stinking and I'm talking to people and, and they're definitely starting to isolate themselves from me and I don't even know why, right? So talk a little bit more about that in
Yeah,
terms
yeah,
of, yeah.
definitely. Yeah, like if we're in a group of people, uh, definitely don't want one person being picked out of the group and being judged like a book from the start, just based on the first interaction of another human.
Hmm. Hmm. Judgments, that's big in our necessity to what makes us human, right? So when we start to get judged, a lot of times it also creates this place where there's a separation, because when people start to judge you, you start questioning yourself as a person or as a human being that want to be connected, but still isolate yourself because you feel this sense of judgment.
Mm.
Is that would that be kind of accurate in terms of your understanding about what do you think makes us human?
Yeah, that would be accurate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yep.
You want to say more about that?
I believe it takes a lot to judge somebody,
Mm.
and what's reciprocal judging somebody is only a momentary um adjustment in your own mind. Yeah, it's only a momentary adjustment in your own mind.
Yeah, talk a little bit about it because this is the shift that has to happen to feel connected, like that momentary adjustment when you start to judge someone,
Mm.
right? But what does it take for us to be able to stop that moment in that moment and say, no, I ain't doing that? Like, shifting your thought. That's what I'm saying in relationship to, the way we judge people. And then the other thing is about judging ourselves, right? We judge ourselves. And that can take us away from what, it means to experience ourselves as connected, as human beings. Judgment definitely disconnects. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about disconnect, right? Excuse me. But my second question is, do you think human connections are important? Why or why not?
Mm. Me personally,
From wherever you want to speak from.
it depends on the degree of connectivity that there is. Um, like on an everyday basis, where people feel like they have to talk to people and feel like they have to communicate about anything rather than nothing. Um, I don't think there's a need for that the magnitude of that connection. I don't think there's a need for that. but to the everyday life, just so you can feel happy in the everyday life, going around and talking to people, and or just so you can feel happy for yourself, is I think that's the only real need for connectedness, because I people come from all different types of walks of life, and some people want to feel connected more than others, and others like to feel solo. Others like to feel apart from the crowd, to feel like they have a sense of power in themselves.
Mm.
I guess for some, there's a need for connectedness, and for others, not so much, because they have a feeling of leadership already. They already have a feeling of authority to themselves for what they need to do in their daily lives.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's no need for them to really connect with others to help them with their daily feelings or their daily postures that they need
Mhm.
to feel human.
Mm. So some people can feel human without having to actually interact with others in order to feel connected.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me more about, maybe if you can, people who, because what I heard definitely in that conversation was that sometimes just talking to people just to be talking to people don't make you connected.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's what you were saying, but it sounded like, you can go out in your everyday and yeah, you can connect with people by talking with people and stuff. But some people don't need that. They don't need to be out just all the time engaged with people to feel connected.
Mhm.
And so tell me from your, like your own self, like how do you feel connected?
Yeah, for me, I guess I need a sense of connection. I would always need a sense of connection, especially dealing with a child or having a child, because if I'm not connected to other people who have children, then I would really have no idea how to start my day or how to finish my day taking care of a child in the correct way. And yeah.
Yeah. So talk more about taking care of a child, because that's a connection. Like, I know that mothers feel that kind of connection, where they know that I gotta protect this child, I gotta take care of this child, I gotta make sure that this child is getting what they need, not just physical, like you mean beginning, like making sure there's nothing on their face, so when they go out, they ain't nobody laughing at them or something like that, right? But taking care of a child, that's, mothers generally, not always, have an instinct to want to protect their children or take care of children in a kind of way, nurturing, right? But you're a dad, right? And so you might have a different way of thinking about what connecting to your child means. So tell me a little bit more about what you need to do, or what you feel you have to do to stay connected, and especially when we talk about children.
Well, for me as a man, my connection to a child is always going to be heightened, because from the start of making a child, I was in a heightened state of mind, and I was in a kind of a leisure type of state of mind where I was getting benefits from
Making the
making a
child,
baby.
right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was getting benefits from making a baby. And for a mother, they more so have the connectedness. They more so feel like they have instinct, because they want to do stuff for something that gave them so much pain. They experienced the physical pain, which nurtured their brain into thinking that they are instinctually ready to take care of a child, when in all reality, nobody's instinctually ready to take care of a child. They're just working, they're diligent about working to maintain them.
So do you feel like it's set up in our society to stay connected to children, is a duty,
As a duty, yes.
more than and so is there a difference between duty and responsibility?
Yeah, I feel like when you have a duty to do something, there's a lot of positive enrichment that comes along with it. When you have a responsibility to something, it's more so like a chore. Like growing up for children, it becomes more so like a chore, or a or something that you're kind of overwhelming yourself with.
But and so I want to recapture that, this idea of the difference between duty and responsibility. And I ask you if, uh, do you think it's a duty to, be connected and stay connected to your child or your children, or a responsibility?
I think it's a duty because it when I wake up in the morning, I mean, I feel like it's a duty for me to make breakfast for a child, or I feel like it's a duty to make sure that they get dressed. Because when I was a child, I wouldn't want to feel like I couldn't get dressed because no one was helping me. Or I wouldn't want to feel like I couldn't eat because nobody was helping me. So knowing that I've received, it feels like a duty to give back.
Mm. Yeah, it's very noble, quite noble in the sense that this idea between duty and responsibility. So, where do you think this notion of responsibility, like this concept of having to be responsible, comes from?
I think responsibility comes more so from the parents. I don't know. I think it's just a mixture of the words. I think the words just define themselves. I don't it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it reminds me of just like labeling, right? So we label things with words, right? But we don't, in terms of the disconnect between the words and what we actually do. Because a little bit earlier, you talked about something about connection. Like you didn't use the word energy, but you did in the sense when you were saying how you were getting, uh, you were at a heightened state of mind and when you were creating a child because you were getting a benefit from it, right? And there's also this energy that when you are in a state of mind that connects to other people, it connected to the baby's mother, it connected to the baby being produced, right? So when you have that heightened state, it does transfer and it transfer in the way of energy. And I want to get at some point to this idea about the energy we exchange that makes us connected, because it's not just our physical experience, right? It's something much more, I think, more ethereal, like meaning that you can't touch it, you can't hold it in your hand, but it's definitely a way to connect, like so with your child. You already know, like my child is experiencing something, and I don't know how to do that, or I feel that he's going through something, or I feel that she's going through something, right? And then you try to get at what that is because you feel a duty to support that child's growth and development. That's what I'm thinking.
I think I feel a responsibility to that, not a duty.
Okay, make the distinction for me.
Because I feel like it would be a responsibility based on
No, yeah, about the difference between duty and responsibility, but responsibility when I was talking about energy, right? Maybe I took it a little bit further than we needed to go, but you were talking about the heightened awareness, the heightened state of mind, because you were benefiting at the time you were creating a child. And the fact that you feel a duty to make sure that she gets the things that she needs because you got that. Like you don't know if you could, if you needed breakfast and nobody was there to fix you breakfast, or if you needed to be dressed and nobody was there to dress you to show you how to do that, And then I asked you about responsibility and what's the difference, and was it, we talked about words, right? So is it a word, just a word that people don't really have meaning for it, or is it something else? And you started this talk about the difference in terms of what responsibility represents.
I feel like responsibility is something that's yet to be seen, that somebody else is um giving to you. Somebody else is giving you a responsibility for something that you don't see yet. For example, for example, if a boss had a way to make it easier for everybody in this in the work environment by giving me a responsibility to pick up all the boxes around during the day around just to make it easier for everybody else to manage and walk around. I feel like that would be a responsibility because I don't know the problem that everybody's having walking around with boxes all over the floor and everything. But as soon as he gave me a responsibility, it it gave me something to do, but at the same time, it was based upon knowledge that I do not know myself.
Mm.
So I feel like a responsibility is represents more than you know. It represents more than you know.
Yeah. I get it. That's so powerful. It's powerful the way you make that distinction between duty and responsibility. Because when you talked about duty, you talked about giving back. That I got to give back what I got, right? And we're going to come back to that in a second. I got to give back what I got. And then responsibility is somebody's giving you something to do, something that you can't even see what that responsibility means to the whole, right? So you take on that responsibility, even though you might not see. You said you may not see it. You may not know exactly why that responsibility is important in that moment, but you take it on because it's going to benefit the whole. Because that person who's giving you that responsibility may be able to, like, and you gave the work environment as an example. They see the connection between all those different pieces in order for the whole to run effectively or efficiently or run, period, right?
Mhm.
And so that idea that to be responsible means that you have made a commitment to do this, no matter whether you see why it's being done over here and whatever's being done over here, but you've made a commitment. And so responsibility is honoring that commitment. Duty is honoring your own sense of I think moral,
Reality.
your own reality in terms of what you can give back. So I want to go back to the give back, right? In terms of the duty. So when people who may not, and we're gonna use your example with your child, right? When people are not able, and I try not to use the word not because it's, it negates everything, right? But when people haven't received what they needed when they were growing up, like no one showed them how to make their bed, no one showed them how to brush their teeth, no one showed them that you got to eat breakfast in the morning. You're hungry, but no one helped you to get that when you were younger, when you weren't in a position to do it.
Now that becomes a responsibility because somebody telling you in the street your breath stinks or your teeth look a little yellow, you need to brush them. That it makes it a responsibility. Now you're just like, now I gotta that responsibility.
The responsibility, and that's responsibility to yourself, right? But the responsibility as it relates to being, I love it. I love what you're saying because I've never thought about the distinction between duty and responsibility. And the fact that you didn't get it don't mean that you can't be responsible for making sure that somebody else got it, right?
Yeah.
And and when you go back to the whole thing when I ask you about makes us, what do you think make us human? And you say, yeah, like, when you can be honest with somebody, you can tell them, hey man, wipe off your beard, something's on it, right?
Mhm.
Hey man, you know what? Oh man, you gotta brush your teeth, or you get some mints, man. However way you do it, right? That is a responsibility to supporting other people, staying connected to other people, but through honesty, not through just walking around and he walking around, people looking at him and you with him, and now you're feeling embarrassed and all of those emotions that come with all of that.
Mhm.
So anyway, that thank you for that. Thank you for the lesson on duty and responsibility. It gives me a new lens for looking at it. Okay, so my next question is, like you already told me what human connections mean to you, but and you also talked about, my question was, how do these human connections occur? Like, what makes them happen? Like, well, in what ways do they occur?
For me, it's usually the lack of something. Like if I'm lacking something, even if I don't know what it is that I'm lacking, um, I look for connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Just like any animal or any cell or something that doesn't have something, doesn't have a certain kick to it. It looks for connectivity to find that kick. It looks for some more cells to bond with to make that kick happen for him,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not happening for the other cells.
Mm-hmm. You mean cells in the body or cells in a store?
If I represent cells, use cells as a representation of like any human body, any human.
Oh, the human body in terms of the cells that make us up, and there might.
Yeah, when I was thinking small because usually when I tend to think, I think big and I think small, or I think small and I think big to represent itself.
Mm.
So when I talk about the cells, I was talking about like maybe a lonely cell who's not getting the right nutrients or something. Like the other cells around there getting the nutrients, but the one cell's not getting the nutrients. So it needs to connect with those other cells to figure out how the nutrients can be given.
Yeah. Oh, I got it. I definitely got it.
So that's me thinking small.
Yeah.
And then me thinking big would be like uh, I'm one human, and everybody has a toothbrush, and I need a toothbrush to brush my teeth so I can smile every day
Mm-hmm.
without my breath stinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to connect with those people to figure out how they got a toothbrush so that I can
Wow.
brush my teeth as well.
And what I love is that you go from the small, which is the micro, to the large, which is the macro, and then there's the one in the middle. And I think the one in the middle is right, like, how did you get a toothbrush? Because I need a toothbrush so that I can feel, good about my mouth or whatever, right? So for me, that's like in the middle. But if we talk about the macro, the larger one in relationship to humanity and our connection to other beings, other humans on the planet, not in our local space, not our own family, but how do we connect to those to the macro, to human beings elsewhere?
Yes, that's a pretty profound, pretty deep question. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's just like when that knows you brilliant because that's a question I gotta ponder. I gotta think about that, right? And it's worthy of thinking about because we don't just live in our little small bubbles, right? Our little small connected bubbles. And for those of us who are uh, don't necessarily need to be out with people a lot to be feel connected, but to think about the things that's going on in the world and how our little smallness can have impact on that thing going out and that big thing that's happening out in the world. How we think, what we do, what we connect with, right? So it's just worthy of a thought. That's all I was trying to just bring that into the picture around the micro, the mess, what we call the meso, the middle part, and then the big part, big part. Like there's a big part, there's a big part. So
Yeah, for me as a human, I find it easy to tamper or to put into things that are dealing with the micro
Mhm.
because it won't make such a big wave. It won't affect so many things. But I think twice, three times, four times, 100 times before I try to engage anything into the macro or try to put any of my energy or anything into the macro because the wave might be too big for me to handle. So when it returns as a thought or as a position or as a motive, it becomes too much for it. It's a wave that will overwhelm me.
Now that's deep. For you to dig that deep to understand that relationship and when something is too big for you to capture here, but knowing that on the small level, that you can make a difference in that small level. And think about this. If many people realize that you can make a difference at that micro level, that it's going to impact that macro level in some ways. When you get a critical mass of something, critical mass of people operating at the cellular level, right? Healthy. Say, let's look at health, for example, right? If everybody's looking at their health and thinking about it from the cellular level, or responding to it, which is responsibility, to the cellular level, then enough people doing that can impact that next level, can impact the world, right? So that's pretty deep. I really appreciated that because it means that those are the kind of intellects, like it's not just an intellect, it's like I think it's a spiritual understanding of the reality that we live in as human beings. So I appreciate that. And I think I got maybe one more question because you pretty much answered all the questions that I had already. Uh, two questions, actually. What kinds of things you think disconnect us as human beings? Speak more about that.
I say conversation. I'll give you an example. So I say conversation because if I was sitting in front of a fat person, right? A big person, a heavyweight person, and I had to think about myself before I connected to this person. I had to think about my emotions. I had to think about how somebody would make me feel before I start making somebody else feel a certain way. I have to think about, there's a lot of little things I have to think about before connecting with somebody because they say, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. So I would want good things done unto myself. I would have to think about it before I connect with somebody. I have to think about how I'm talking to them. I would have to think about how they're receiving how I'm talking to them. Like, I don't want to say something about being unhealthy and really they can I don't want to say something about being unhealthy and I have a fat person sitting in front of me because they're automatically going to think about, they're going to get self-conscious and think about it's okay.
Yes.
They're saying I'm fat.
Yes. And you don't maybe come out and write and say, hey, you fat, right?
Yeah.
But it's like what comes out of your mouth if you start talking about, oh, being healthy, or
And I could be just talking about being healthy for myself.
you, right? But that person being in that space may take it a certain way. So you're very thoughtful before you speak. So conversations sometimes create hurt.
It hurts, yeah.
Hurt. It can create hurt.
And it could disconnect you because if I'm talking about health with this person and this person starts to talk about something else because they get disconnected
Mhm.
about what the conversation is about,
Mhm.
and they get disconnected from the conversation, between the conversation and their emotions. And words are the easiest way to puncture an emotion or to push an emotion off the edge.
Wow. That's serious. I'm telling you, that's serious. Like, and I'm so appreciating the fact that you connect that words can puncture. That's a beautiful metaphor. Words can puncture the emotions. So we have to be thoughtful about what we are having conversations about with any one person. That's deep. Thank you. Whoa. I need to hear more conversations with you. I'm going to put this in conversations, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, I like to use that words can puncture can puncture an emotion, puncture one's emotions. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Probably have to think about how you're thinking about emotion.
Yes. So words can puncture another person's emotions, and if you're not thoughtful, that's what you're hurting people. So you have to be very thoughtful. In Buddhism, it talks about, it's better to keep your words close
Mm-hmm.
before you speak. So that's what the whole being still, so that you can actually feel and hear what you need to say or don't say.
Mhm.
So that's a discipline. And we started off with this conversation. You talked about discipline. At the beginning, you talked about, how it's necessary to, no, you said I was talking about diligence. Right. So diligence is what you need, the diligence and being able to be thoughtful in ways that you don't puncture someone else's emotion.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. And then my last question is, and before I go to that last question, the idea that this can disconnect us, that conversations can connect us and it can disconnect us
Yep.
at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'd like to bring you back at another point when we talk about connections and technology and what happens with us, all the things that you mentioned as us as humans. Like, how does that relate to the new technology as that technology is taking over our connections, right? We'll talk about that another time. But in any event, the last thing is, what makes you feel more connected to one person than you do another?
Mainly, actually, it's mostly the silence that we share. If I can sit in a room silent with somebody for a long period of time, I think I would feel more connected to them on a human level because I know that my teeth were brushed, my face was washed, my arms don't stink. I'm sitting next to this person, and they're not angry or frustrated on my smell or my hygiene or anything like that.
Mhm.
So it's everything is already taken care of, and then just sitting in a silent uh place with somebody makes me feel connected on a human level. Like, okay, I'm human, and I know the daily things that make me human, the daily diligence that make me human, and that would make me more connected to somebody than talking with somebody for a whole bunch of time.
Wow, wow, thank you. I never put it that way, but that is where I feel most connected, is in silence. And it's one of the reasons I practice Buddhism, is the silence, particularly Zen Buddhism, where you're with other people, but you don't have to be in conversation. As a matter of fact, you're not. And it's all silence. So everybody's in their own mind processing and, letting go of the things that are in their minds that keep them disconnected from themselves and also disconnected from other people because of the thoughtless ways in which we behave and act outside of when we are in conversations or when we're puncturing other people's emotions. And so sitting for me is really important. It's one of my practices every day. I don't leave unless I pray and I sit. And prayer for me is like me asking God to be merciful. Like I believe in a higher power and believing in that higher power and whatever people call it. I don't care what they call it. That is something that animates my spirit, animates my soul. And so what I do is I always say that prayer is when we ask God. Meditation is when we listen for what the answers are and that they're all inside of us. The answers are already inside of us. And so what you're saying about being able that silence is where you feel most connected. I can resonate with that. It's a resonance for me because when I'm in meditation, I'm in the most peaceful place.
For example, church,
Mhm.
when everybody's giving money, everybody's at a state of silence. Nobody's thinking about anybody else's amount, how much they have or anything. They're not thinking about the extra stuff that person's bringing, but they're just silent, and everybody is handing out an amount based on what was given to them. Based on, okay, everybody, we need lights in this church. So everybody's putting in money, or whoever can puts in money for lights, but it's silent. So nobody's judging, nobody's judging anybody up. And
You can keep going with that. Because that ties our conversation up. Because one of the virtues that you tell, or one of the things that disconnect people is the judgment. That isolate people is the judgments, right? And what you just gave, the analogy you just gave about being in church and giving money, that nobody's looking to see, oh, she only gave a quarter. Oh, she only gave $2. Oh, she only gave $1, right? Or he gave $100, right?
Mhm.
And that because now you're working towards something that's greater than yourself, meaning having lights on in the church so that we can come together and be connected, right?
Mhm.
And the idea that you use that as a metaphor, it is perfect because, quote, religious people are supposed to be that non-judgmental, right? But then sometimes they're the most judgmental. And so to be in a space where you can be silent and you're giving and you're receiving and knowing that you're doing something that's going to impact or benefit someone greater than yourself. I don't care how much it is. If you can't give nothing, you're giving your well wishes, or you're giving your spirit, like your prayer or whatever, to make sure that so that we get lights in the place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming back to be connected again.
Yeah. Thank you. I knew this was awesome. I need to talk with you every morning, man. You sure take me to levels that I rarely have.
It was lovely talking to you too.
Oh, thank you. I want people to know we are leaving this space and we're hoping that people are inspired, they're engaged, and they are thinking how they can connect and cultivate the connections that they have or they would like to make. This challenges the narratives constructed by others for us, without us. Narratives about powerlessness as individuals, as families, as neighbors, as communities, and nations of people. Conversations that cultivate people's understanding of power and the institutional, systemic, and structural conditions impacting human suffering. And finally, we want to leave you with our conversation today. And we want you to imagine new possibilities, a new narrative, a new action, and a new lens from which to see and transform your condition or the human condition. Thank you, and until next time.